Welcome to our first podcast episode featuring Lars Wild, an actor-turned-farmer living in southwest Alentejo, Portugal. Lars was the subject of our most recent film, Wild, and I had a chance to sit down with him to learn more about his story. Our intention with this podcast is to give long-form dialogue that dives into more depth beyond our films, providing a deeper understanding of these individuals, their craft, and their purpose. We hope you enjoy it. For someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your work, and maybe has seen the film that we just produced and is curious about what this is all about, I mean, what was your upbringing like in Switzerland? What was the kind of container that started this whole journey that you're on?
Yeah, in a way, kind of already in the kindergarten. I remember a story from the teacher, or the one in the kindergarten who was responsible for us kids. She told us a story that you could, from a seed of a pear, grow a pear tree. And I remember I was like 6 years old, and I was so excited. I thought, wow, this is possible. And the first thing was I went to my mother, I want a pear. And she gave me a pear, and then of course I took out the seed and I shoveled it in the ground. But I didn't know that they need a period of stratification, meaning a period of cold in order to grow and germinate. But I went like every second day to look if there is a tree there, and I was a little disappointed that nothing happened. And then out of disappointment I forgot that, and I went into other things. But I remember when I was then 9 or 10, I began to grow my orange trees. I grew out of everything. My brother laughed at me because I even tried to plant these tiny points in the bananas because I thought they were seeds. I put them on cotton and waited, and of course just mold was growing, nothing else. But orange trees and melons and kiwis, I grew even. I was really always in plants. And also when I was a kid, I went to my grandfather, and he was half-time mason, stonemason, half-time he was farmer, and I loved to help him on the farm, climbing on apple trees, eating apple from the tree, eating cherry from the tree. It was really amazing for me. That was the first thing. But yeah, first I went into acting. So acting was my first real love. But before acting, I did even I made a study in pharmacy. So for 4 years I did that. So there was the plant component and the acting component in there, because what I realized also being a pharmacist, what I sell are not just the products or the teas. We made kind of mixtures of tea, but while I'm mixing the tea, the people bought more the story I told. Yeah, this calendula is really good. Again, it's anti-inflammatory, and this one is working with this, and so on. And so there was the acting, and then I went for quite a while for the acting. So when I was 20, I turned to be an actor and studied acting. And yeah, this went on until mainly 2015, so like 10 years ago.
And something happened around that time that kind of catalyzed some transformation that brought you here, right? And
yeah, exactly.
And I already know that story, but for people that don't know that story,
yeah.
How would you frame this?
Yeah, the thing is, I played a play, the Misanthrope, a guy who hates humanity, because he says, the character said, and I, as the character said as well, I hate human beings. They are lying. I don't like these hierarchies. They are exactly the best environment for lies and so on. And I was going so deep in the character that at the end, I really thought, he's right. And then during that time, I was also, in order to get in character, I really went a little bit in the rabbit hole, what is wrong in the state of Denmark? Like Hamlet would say, what is wrong here? And I saw so many things which are not really creating trust, and which gave me then later on the reason to leave acting. I couldn't entertain this culture anymore because I couldn't believe in it. And before I decided myself really to do what I'm doing now, I wanted to go on a journey for 40 days. I wanted to be at a place without food, without internet, without phone, nothing, not even books. I didn't want even to have books. So I was there and I just wanted to find out what happened with human consciousness without outer impulse. And the funny thing was really, what happened was kind of a recapitulation of my own life. And after I didn't make it without food, also for 40 days, I didn't make it. I just, at 21 days, I really had the feeling, ooh, it's a little dangerous. I cannot sit upright anymore. I don't have the power. I'm about to collapse because I felt like my heart couldn't pump up the blood in my brain. And then I called my partner at that time and I said, bring me some food. And then I went back into the city because there where I did this retreat, it was completely out of the city, out of my normal context. I came back and really those PR, these commercials, this light, it was for me as if I was an alien coming back to a city where I felt I'm an alien here. And then my partner in the play, the Misanthrope, who played my best friend, I had an email from him and he said, hey, all the conversation we had, we cannot trust here this culture of global enlargement, or however you want to call it. You could also call it the military complex, kind of. We cannot trust that. We need to make a play about, in order to reveal Mordor. And then I said, well, you know, when we do a play, we have two possibilities. The first possibility, nobody is interested in the play, so why bother doing it? Or second, it's a huge success. And what do we get? We get money as a value exchange. But money is exactly, I have the feeling our money is a root problem of our society. So it was then, I thought we cannot get out of it. Theater doesn't work as a tool anymore for these problems we are facing. So I thought we need to do something else. And then we did a PDC with Jeff Lawton, who is kind of a prominent guy in the permaculture scenes. And it was great, but as I found out then later, it was not applicable for this region. It didn't work. Those whales didn't work really. The lakes we didn't work really. Of course, it's also questionable. Was a PDC enough to really get the knowledge for all of that. But yeah, I came then more into this world of syntropic agriculture, and I was really fascinated by that. And that was then slowly the transformation towards really, from a earthwork design world more to an actual interaction with nature and working with plants and enhance the power of plants in the place I'm living. So yeah, this is that. Hopefully not too big of a monologue.
No, it's great. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of elements of the story that I want to kind of dive into, and I guess part of it is when you said you were a child and you were kind of experimenting with trying to grow and trying to plant, and I also remember when I was a child, like in school, in primary school in the UK, there's things that they teach you and they do with you that when you change to the next school completely is stripped away, you know, like all of the creative elements. Unless you pursue art, there is no creative element to the higher education levels. And it's interesting because actually, like, I feel like there's some things that are more important that are learned in the primary school in terms of the creativity, in terms of seeing how life works. Like we would like germinate, I think, alfalfa sprouts and stuff like this, you know, just like in kitchen roll. And the purpose of it, I mean, I don't know. It's like, you know, you don't say like, oh, this is learning the times table, which is obviously important, or, you know, learning about algebra, which is completely useless for most actual practical situations. I guess part of what I think is this way of living now that we're engaging with, which is very much more with the primary elements of learning and teaching. Are we maybe in a way trying to come back to this purity of the childlike perception of playing and being curious and not getting lost in algebra? Exactly.
And there you go. I mean, the thing is, the creativity of kids is so enormous. They asked a kid what they think you could do with a nail. And the answers were, I mean, before they went to school, and the answers were like thousand-folds, hundreds of things they could imagine. And then you ask someone after 5th degree, and they just can think of, with a hammer, throw it in the wall. That's it. Is it right? You know, right and wrong. Kids, they don't have it. And I think this creativity is really very important. And I think also one of the basic narratives for also our culture where we live in is this lost paradise narrative. And the question is, what all contain or is contained in the lost paradise narrative? And for example, creativity is lost in the lost paradise narrative. What is there is just I have to, you know, and what was the exchange in this lost paradise? We lost feelings, right? And what did we gain? Knowledge. So everything comes from knowledge. And when you act upon knowledge, then you are also in the lost paradise narrative. And to get back there, in the paradise narrative is be innocent as much as you can, don't know nothing, feel everything, be open, like a kid, you know, like a little kid which is completely curious. And this curiosity, I think, cures also the whole world. Because consciousness with this knowledge and with this power game is really going in a very destructive way, as we see now. And we need powerful answers to that. And for me, the Lost Paradise thing is kind of a reference point, where we see where we lost our shit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Lost Paradise, I feel, when people become adults and, you know, we're pushed into career paths and what are we going to do, how are we going to make money to survive in this economic framework that we're in, it becomes something even more of an illusion, because you realize actually the way that people try to recreate paradise within this economic framework actually makes a lot of mess. You know, the places that seem impressive, you know, the places that are built with a huge empire of wealth and resource, you know, they're beneath it buried on a lot of awful things, you know, not always, but like in many cases. And then when you actually look at the real paradise, which is the naturally occurring, you know, kind of Garden of Eden scene, when people think of like the Amazon rainforest, or they think of any scenic place, it wasn't shaped and engineered by humans.
No.
In fact, it's usually butchered by humans.
Yeah,
and then we're
exactly.
trying to
exploit it.
We're trying to come back and say, no, we have to, you know, fence it off and protect it so we don't do this again, right?
Exactly. And there, I mean, we had also a talk a little bit during the lunch. I have the feeling really we need to differentiate between just saving something in order that nature can do the reparation we did, or being a part of nature to improve. And I think if we are just buying something and we are protecting it, that nobody can destroy it, we take ourselves out of the picture. And we think, we go away and we look how it would look like if we are gone, and then we come in and make measurements. But you know, there I have the feeling we didn't discover then our meaning of life. Our meaning of life is to interact with it, to improve it, because we have so many skills. If we are harnessing these skills in the interaction with nature, I mean, we could be a beautiful part of paradise, but we have chosen, it must be hard. It's under our sweat. This is also, I mean, very biblical, but this story, I think, is very accurate. It's like a manual. It's kind of a manual what to do to really lose happiness and joy. So, hard labor, under your sweat, no joy, all of that. And there you have to be creative in order to refine how to do it in a way that is like paradise, you know? And there it is driven by inner joy, driven by inner pleasure, unconditional love, complete trust. There are mindsets which are very important exactly now also to work with, because we are always here in the medias, or not always, but many times we hear like, you cannot trust, the climate is against us and it collapses, and nature catastrophe and so on. The climate is fine. And when you say the climate is fine, you're lying that we have problems in the climate. No. But it's not the climate. The climate is just kind of a reaction to our actions on this planet, you know. But if we are change these actions, the climate is fine. Everything is fine. The CO2 in the air is fine. It's a reaction that we burn the carbon from the soil. Of course, where should it go if we don't store it in the soil? In the air. It waits there until we have enough plants. The plants take in the carbon and store it again. But of course, if we burn everything, it's fine, it goes up. And with that, even the growth will be faster. But if we have no trees here, the carbon, of course, has no way to go. But for the universe, it's fine. It's just for us not so cool anymore, because we destroy our foundation of living, right?
Yeah.
But the universal laws, they're fine, they're great, they're powerful, they're eternal, and we can cooperate with it, or we can have fear with it again. We can have fear from those universal laws. But fear is not always a good advisor. Sometimes yes, but not always. Especially in creation, it's a bad advisor. But if you are going into a wrong direction, fear is a very good advisor, because it stops you. Sometimes it's good that we stop and we reorient ourselves. And then in the reorientation, then I think creativity is much more important than fear, because when you take the fear in the reorientation, then you are creating probably problems.
What I'm really interested in with this project, and really in anything that explores the relationship with people and land, is how we got where we are. And I did quite a lot of reading, and it barely scrapes the surface, because you can never know the total truth of things. And even when you read a book, you don't know if that's even doing justice to what actually happened. But in the UK, there was historically a sequence of events where there was the loss of the commons and land became privatized. Exactly. And essentially it became like a kind of enclosure process where places became fenced where there were no fences before.
Yes.
There was the idea of the forests that were the hunting grounds for the king, and before it was the grounds where the commoners could gather materials and they could hunt and they could forage. And we completely lost this, and it makes me think it's a kind of interesting reference point that when you think how this idea has spread with colonization and how normal it's become, that everyone has private property, or at least had, not so much anymore. And it's a topic now that when we find ourselves in these circles, it's kind of the deal breaker, really, because a lot of people don't have access to land because of privatization.
Exactly.
Because it's easier to have access if you inherit land, or if you inherit wealth, which can buy land. I guess I'm curious to know what your perspective is on private ownership of land, and how that relates to the way that we interact with each other and the world.
Yeah, I think ownership is something completely abstract and not natural. And I have the feeling that the ownership, the invention of ownership came because we lost the trust between other human beings, and the trust towards nature as well. And therefore we tried to do the thing with the ownership. And I have the feeling that as long as we have ownership, we are cultivating the lack of trust as well. Because, if you are really understanding your function in this world, and your function and your meaning into nature, you will improve what is around you. So why should ownership limit you? But because we became more not Homo sapiens, which is the wise man, but we are more homo destructivus, which is the man who destroys everything. We thought now we take ownership as the golden, I don't know what, you know, as how you say, Holy Grail, as the Holy Grail. And it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work because you see it also in nature. As soon as you make border, the animals, they cannot cycle anymore naturally, and this leads to destruction, and this leads to not being really in the cycle of nature. And of course, I mean, I also don't think we should completely neglect our culture, although destructive, but if you are not accepting it as a limited way of regulate certain things, then you earn a lot of resistance, and that's also not the thing. But of course, from a philosophical way, I think ownership doesn't make sense, because the interaction of any wild boar, for example, is not dependent on ownership, but the wild boar goes at places where it feels this is the spot where I want to interact. And I think there is also a real important understanding that the hunger of animals, and our own hunger as well, is not a mechanism from nature for survival. It is a mechanism to improve the nature. But we took our hunger as survival mechanism, and therefore we exploit everything. For our hunger is not even a hunger, it's a greed. And I think Gandhi said, you can satisfy all the needs of all the human beings, no problems, but you cannot satisfy the greed of one single human being. And that's the thing. We should distinguish between needs, meaning hunger, and greed. And greed leads to exploitation. It is a fear response, it's a traumatic response, but hunger leads to improvement of yourself and of your environment and all the humans around you. And I think in animals it is exactly like this. But often when we see these animal movies, we see the greedy lion who had for several days no fodder, and then these poor gazelles. And then, you know, often these narratives divides then in predator and the victim, you know, the prey. The poor prey has no chance to go away, and BAM! No, this lion is a gardener. Without the lion, they wouldn't move cyclical, those gazelles. And without this lion, they would probably have too many gazelles and so on. So the lion as a predator creates harmony. The same happens in the insects world. If you have no predator there, you would have not the balance. And therefore, it's very critical to go in with insecticides, because you are destroying these harmonious interactions. Same in the soil. In the soil there are prey and predators, but they create life, they create microbiology, and they create harmony from which all the plant growth is dependent. And therefore, when you see that even the bacteria, every single sentient being is driven by a hunger which improves the environment, Why are we so special? Because we are saying we are special. We are saying we are the crown of creation. And this is also the lost paradise thing. If we were not the crown of creation, but we are a part of a wonderful universe, we are a part of paradise, we wouldn't have this hubris, is it called, I think, where you overestimate your own power. And this is a mindset which leads to the fact that we fall from our overestimation, and we think, wow, how cool we are, and then bam. Crisis is something which is inevitable when you have this mindset, and we are meeting this crisis. And it's very interesting. 10 years ago, before I began here, or when I began, and I said, hey, we are really leading this, kind of, hey, guys, the Titanic is sinking. No, come on, play violin, be louder, and so on. But now, when I say that, many people say, oh, fuck, you're right. Not everybody, of course. I think the power of sleep is really very, very big. And people are asleep and they don't want to. Don't want to recognize, because they don't want to confront themselves with their own destructive way, and they don't have the courage to go new ways, I think. So
it's interesting, because when you talk about, you're kind of referencing like nature documentaries and how we have these roles that we project onto different animals, and it's the same with everything. Like everything that we look at, we're assuming what the role and the function is based on how we've organized our roles and our functions, which is also something that we're told in that stage of school when we move from the creative, expressive, curious mentality and state of being, and then into this very functional, like, okay, you're going to fulfill a role, you're going to do this job, you need to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And because of these assumptions and these beliefs, we assume that everything else is like that. It's like, well,
exactly.
It's a pretty shit situation to be, this animal because they always get eaten by sharks, or this animal because they live in some cold place. But it's like they've adapted to that situation, and they're not obviously thinking, oh, I'm a poor seal for getting eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
But they're just being and fulfilling their natural function.
Exactly.
And completely separate from the ideas that we're assuming about who or what they are and why they're existing, whether they're predator, whether they're prey. And I guess part of what I find really interesting about this kind of perspective shift, especially with rural living, is the traditional narratives with farming is very much a war on nature. It was about removing the wild places because they are, even in a way, like fear-inducing to us, because we don't have control over them. Like, look at the weeds, we have to exterminate them. And then the wider the boundary becomes for the monoculture, the higher the yield becomes, the higher the graph shows for profit, the better.
Yeah.
And it's completely the opposite. And now we're kind of coming back to this and thinking, actually, farming isn't the problem. Farming is actually the solution. It's a solution done in the right way, and that's a big difference from the conventional. Not always, but often in environmental circles, people often throw a lot of shit at farmers, and of course they don't always have the best consequences for their actions. But there's a different approach when you change the philosophy of who we are and how we function and what the soil is and how it functions and how farming can be and how it can function. You realize actually all of these things are all assumptions based on what we thought was the case. And now we change it and the whole thing changes.
Yes. Yes.
I guess it's an interesting one, because, would you call yourself a farmer? because I know there's a implicit assumption in that, but like what does that word mean to you? Like how are you reinventing it?
Yes. Yeah, that's an interesting one. In a way, I think it makes me humble to say, yes, I'm a farmer, but then again, being an actor, I'm a little bit in resentment to the word farmer, because often when you think of a farmer, it's exactly what, it's this hard labor thing. It's really, you go tough and you earn nothing, and you stand up early and you have kind of a mechanized routine, every day the same, kind of, or almost the same. And this is not how we interact here. So, I mean, it sounds a little bit strange perhaps, but I see myself more like a co-creator with nature, a transformative co-creator, because that's what I see, what happens here. When I do the things, it transforms. It transforms from something where you could say it's an accumulation of nutrition towards a transition towards abundance. And the abundance is exactly the transformation towards abundance, is in a way the transformation towards paradise. And paradise is not necessarily kind of something defined. Paradise is something infinitely dynamic, which is always changing, which is always in a transformative process, and with that very creative. Because the more diversity you accumulate, the more transformative power you have, and things happen, synergy effects, which you never dreamt of, you couldn't calculate, but those are the laws of nature, which I told before, which are still there. You know, it's kind of, if we would depend mainly on gravity, for example, and we are fearful, oh, one day perhaps gravity doesn't function anymore because we fucked up so much our planet, gravity goes away. No, it's always there. And with gravity, it's easy to perceive because we know, yeah, when I jump, I come down, great. But all the other laws of nature, they're also still here. Of course, we created a disbalance and we went from abundance towards accumulation, let's say, towards a place where we are really not feeling home. But we have the power to create our home again. So, yeah, I would then say I'm a co-creator with nature. And I would also say what we are doing is more transformative creation. Agriculture is also, it's a part of it. I mean, of course, we are cultivating the soil, it's a part of it, but we are also cultivating the plants, we are cultivating also relationships between human beings. So that's why co-creation, I love co-creation. And it's also then more aligned with the actor, because the actor was also a co-creator with the light designer, with the stage designer, with all sorts of people, and they created together, hopefully for the audience, unforgettable play.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel it's much more subtle, of course, because you don't get the social feedback like you do with humans. But if
Exactly.
you do interact, like anyone who has a garden, or even anyone who has a house plant, you know, like I remember as a teenager, like I had a succulent on my window, and I saw like how it would grow, and I saw how it didn't have enough light, and it would just end up really stringy, just like this one big long spaghetti cactus, you know, and that is also that kind of participation, interaction on a much different time frame than what we're used to on a social level.
Yeah.
And I think that essence of feeling time and understanding time is a really interesting one, because the human scale is so distorted. It's just like, you know, like to think about how much things have changed since the Industrial Revolution is mind-blowing, you know, like the world is so different in such a short space of time compared to how slow these processes were over millions of years with evolution and geology. And do you think the slowing down of the human perception of time is important, and why, particularly in this kind of crisis point?
Let's say we need to have a natural rhythm, and now we have more algorithm than a natural rhythm. So we are very dependent now in orientation for next step on algorithms. And this leads then to artificial intelligence, and I often refer, you see, this artificial intelligence is created by algorithm, which is then in another time frame than the natural rhythms, and the natural intelligence is something else. In the natural intelligence is something else inherited, all the natural laws, and they are felt through our senses. And therefore, in order to perceive them, we need to open our senses, and we need to feel also the universal laws in order to interact with them. But I mean, time is anyhow kind of an illusion, but the algorithm is so tense that we have the feeling it's a fast living time through the algorithm. It's very pam, pam, pam. Even when you see movies in our days, you see a cut every 2 seconds. Before, you had the kind of a shot which lasted for 20 seconds. Today it's pam, 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 pam. It's like a machine gun. So with that, we have, of course, the feeling this is crazy. But in nature, I have just another way and another space. And with another space, I have a much broader time spectrum. And I think this is also very important. Also, I mean, in our economy, we think of just 3 months. In 3 months, when everything is fine, good, we have good numbers out there, everything's fine. But we need to act for generations to come, not just for 1 year. We need to act that we have an improvement and a better environment for generations to come. So with that, I think we need to enlarge our spatial feeling, and with that our time space feeling.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the AI subject, because I didn't know that much about what it takes to actually facilitate the AI kind of process in terms of data centers, but I was doing a bit more research on this recently, and learning, also watching documentaries about the issues surrounding creation of data centers, usually in places where land is cheaper, and people, you know, you can have someone who lived in a very peaceful rural place farming, and right next to them they have this huge data center which is permanently illuminated by artificial lighting. You know, it's a hideous building that looks like it doesn't belong anywhere on this earth.
Wow.
Because it's completely obviously constructed for maximum efficiency of everything, maximum efficiency of data, maximum efficiency of resources. And aside from the fact that they use a lot of water in terms of the cooling for these systems. I don't know the intricacies. This is just what I understand. You know, there's the other aspect, which is these aren't abstract, you know, scenarios where AI just comes and we just have this resource. It actually takes resources to create it, and even the creation, destroying the land, destroying the soil, polluting water, using water. I mean, it's very interesting to me because I can't help then but look at that and then look at, you know, the people that perhaps we look more to for wisdom and knowledge, which is more ancestral, it's more intuitive, it's more, it's more, I don't know, it's less head-based, you
exactly.
know?
It's less head-based, it's more heart-based. And that's the thing, I have the feeling our development is kind of, we suck all our energies from our heart in order that we blow up our mind completely. It's like a spiral from here to the mind. The mind gets bigger and bigger with that. Also the knowledge from the internet, which is an externalized mind to which we have all the time access, is a part of it, you know. And it sucks, for my feeling, kind of heart energy. And the thing is, it is also not, sometimes I have also the feeling, AI is not something which is all of a sudden, AI was there and nothing was there before. I mean, Google and all these search engines were nothing else than a kind of an AI thing, which functioned with algorithms. So there we had already AI. Now AI is just a little bit more efficient and explicit. And I have the feeling, in order to come back, we need really, also therefore, I say often, don't be mindful. Don't mind. Be full from your heart, you know. And this is the other way around, that you don't mind and you're opening your heart, and with this you enrich your heart. I think that's what we need to go for. And for me, sometimes it's also a challenge because, of course, I mean, also our conversation, and sometimes also some things, they are mind-blowing, you know, but you shouldn't mind, you know. And yeah, and it's also, with that, I think it's also important to really walk from a sensational world, which is full of sensation, towards a sensual world. And sensation is also very linked to the mind, and we are kind of addicted towards sensation. And we need, because I think this is our nature, we need to go back to our senses. We need to come to our senses, and with that open our hearts.
Yeah, and I can't help but feel like a lot of these subjects, they're so closely interlinked, like a more mentally kind of dominant culture alongside the kind of algorithmic approach for what is driving so much of our behavior and our lives, and then the way that we work, which is obviously very robotic and leaves people feeling drained and uninspired. And then because of all of that continually ramping up to the point where it is just so extreme, you have then this kind of, I feel like there's a tipping point where the people who already weren't really coping so well with that, now they're just like, I'm out, you know.
For sure.
You know, and I'm definitely one of those people, and in a way, I think maybe, you know, I'm not so happy with the way these things develop, but maybe it's not such a bad thing that if it turns up to such an intensity, it becomes so unbearable that people actually kind of think, you know, there isn't just one way of doing things, but this way, which is told to be the one way, sure as hell isn't working, you know, for many, many people. And I even think for the people that it appears to be working for, whether they're CEOs of companies or they have, a lot of wealth or a lot of power in whatever capacity, I also think it doesn't really work well for them.
No.
Because they are then the isolated cell in a system, which is also not healthy.
Absolutely.
And which is meant to be part of this belonging and connection, which it cannot be a part of if it is at the top of that extremely hierarchical structure.
And that's really an important point. I have the feeling often we are blaming those people in power because we are thinking, they're much better off and they are the ones who profit from the system, but they are profit just from a material point of view, which is not really fulfilling them, because we are not living in a material world. We are living in a sensual world, which is kind of spiritual, you could say, and this word is also kind of a, let's say, almost dangerous word, but I mean it's like, why spiritual? Because you cannot really know it. It's a mystery, and therefore you could be always curious. So those people in power, they lost that completely. And to think, they're better off and they have their yachts, they have their Ferraris, so what? They're completely empty, because there, for sure, the spiral is completely in their mind. And the thing is, it perhaps, when you're on the most beautiful yacht or wherever, after 3 days, it's not sensational anymore.
I have that experience a lot on my yacht, on my super yacht.
No, I didn't as well. But I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I was invited to quite fancy places where, at the beginning, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Wow, it's really beautiful. And after like 20 minutes, you're bored of these things. But for example, being in nature and seeing the green and seeing the life in there, it is something which is not so sensational, but it's very open your heart. And that's the place where we need to open all the doors again, in order also to create peace, because all these wars, they are wars over power, and this is we have of course a power problem, because exactly we closed our hearts.
Yeah, and what you were saying, it kind of reminded me of when you view things such as the yacht as a case study, or maybe if you go to like an estate or a hotel, or you pass by somewhere, you see a very fancy house, you see this perfect lawn or perfect lawn. I'm not a fan of lawns actually, but really it's that superficial appearance. It's a superficial appearance which is maintained diligently to create that appearance. It's a bit of a mask, you know, and then when you dig beneath the surface, you realize actually the fabric that holds it together is not healthy, it's not pure. The people who work there, they're there not because they really want to be there, but because they feel, or they don't have a choice, or they have extremely limited choices. And then when you look at nature in terms of what we consider to be appealing or to have beauty, there isn't that superficiality. There is a superficiality in terms of what we perceive, but then when we look deeper, it becomes more amazing, more interesting, more, with more depth than we could realize, that isn't kind of polluted by these very toxic human societal dynamics,
And a big difference is also when you have this luxury, and you have poverty around you, you need to create walls in order to protect it, because it's the artificial values you are accumulating there. But because everybody is agreeing upon these values, it becomes super valuable, but it's completely abstract, where the real value in nature is is there, and you don't need to build walls. You have an invitation from people. They are coming because they cannot take it away. They can be just part of it, you know. You cannot dig out all those. Nobody would go in here and dig out all the trees. I mean, it would make absolutely no sense. But they can be a part of it and be enjoying the fruits. So it is something that creates connection versus the other thing creates division, like divide et impera also, you know. So we need to really go for the wealth which connects us not just to other human beings, but to all sentient beings. And I think often also in the possible solution finding for our crisis, we are seeing it just from a perspective of human beings. But we are not alone here. We have family, we have not just human families, we have animal families, we have plant families, we have microbiology. We are consisting of microbiology. Our whole body is 98% bacteria and microbiology. So this is our family, and we need to take care of that. And when we would see it with this broader perspective, we wouldn't be tempted to be so nationalistic sometime and think, yeah, you know, sometimes I have also the feeling in these wars are like seen like a football game. Either you for nation A or for nation B, and when you are not for nation A and B, you're an ignorant guy, you know. But I have the feeling when we are now reflecting upon what we are talking, it's not the football game. It is something else. It is something where we need to acknowledge that we lost our foundation. And when we know how to create our foundation, then we are getting there where we belong. And I think also I really very much inspired by that you could say to understand nature, you need to understand three things. You need to see the bigger time frame, which we were talking about. You need to see that that nature works cyclical, not linear, richer, 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 richer. It's cyclical and growing, growing, decaying, and so on. And with that, it enriches, the whole thing improves. And the third one, it's based upon diversity. So meaning, not just one plant, which is the king plant. No, it is, you bring in different plants with different time cycles, short cycled plant, medium cycled plant, long cycled plant, and you have this diversity in space. Plants which need a lot of light, which are up here, some which need not so much light, some which love some shade, and some which like to be in filtered sunlight, completely filtered sunlight. And with that you have the different layers of a natural forest. And yeah, and I see it in our system. The more diversity we have, the more microbiology, the more insects we have, the more really vibrant life it's in the soil, above the soil. And of course also the veggies and the fruits, they are much tastier. And with that, again, it opens our senses, you know, for a longer period of time, not just for 5 seconds of wow.
Yeah, and what I kind of had then when you were talking about the kind of division between things is also in terms of the way that we view, our bodies and our health. If we think like, okay, we are these separate, beings, and we're not actually. I mean, it feels absurd, because it's like we talk about it. It's so completely obvious, but on an unconscious level, we're so unbelievably conditioned into our separation from the bacteria, from the ecosystem, from each other, that in a sense, this kind of privatization and fencing of the physical land is also the same way that we view within ourselves. It's like we're afraid of, bacteria and viruses, and of course some we definitely should be cautious of.
Ticks.
Yeah, ticks, exactly, yeah. But at the same time, having that attitude of warfare, of division, of fencing, annihilation, keeping things separate, is also incredibly destructive,
Exactly.
And
yeah,
it kind of struck me as being very interesting just because of that similarity of how we divide things into their own categories.
Absolutely.
And even through our own language, because we talk about plants, we talk about plants through the Latin, names that were given to them. It's like, well, before Latin, before the Roman Empire, before whatever it was that became the dominant ideology, we had another way of referring to things. We had our own, mythology, and these things had a story beyond just being, a cactus or a succulent or something.
Yeah.
I mean, like, do you think the mythological element is important to change our relationship?
Well, yeah, I think the mythological aspect comes into play when we forget, like, the school wisdom. So when we forget all this knowledge which you were also referring to, then it becomes mysterious, and with that we are in the world of mythology as well. It's just a wonder which is around us, and it's impactful, and it is full of life as well, and it's adventurous. I think, yeah, for sure, this is a very, very important aspect. I see that too. It's also, I mean, it gets also revealed then in our dreams. Our dreams are going crazy with that, and especially, I mean, I realize how my dreams really changed since I'm playing the role of a co-creator with nature. It is quite interesting, and it's quite powerful how you see the metamorphosis of those plants, where you have the feeling the division between the plant world and the animal world and the, of course, human world. They are kind of like a flow. They are connected. They are flowing in each other. They are not so separated. And as also you said, also the terminology of individuality, what does it mean? It means individual, you cannot share. It's impossible to share. We cannot share. We cannot have something in common, kind of. This is individuality. And we thought, psychology is talking about how important it is for our sanity to be an individual and to be perceived as an individual. But in nature, nothing is really individual. Everything is in exchange. The plant, the flower, doesn't stand for itself. It's there to attract connection from insects and so on. So it is a network, and in a network, the network is more important than the individual spots. And the individual spots are not existing when you see the connections. Then there are lines, And I think this is very important to perceive that in order to interact with nature. Otherwise, yeah, you have then a object-subject relationship, and I am then the one who is in power of a plant or something like that. And this is it's really kind of it is on both ways, right? The plants has power over me. It's on power is not such a beautiful word. That's what word and world, the power world and the power word I don't like so much. So it's really more this flowing and this interaction, which is so amazing, so inspiring.
Yeah. And what do you think it takes for, you know, people and the world to shift in a way that isn't guaranteeing its own destruction? I mean, it's obviously not the world, it's the way people are interacting with the world and how it will potentially just consume humans or self-regulate to get rid of humans. I mean, it's a very broad question because it obviously depends a lot on who people are and, you know, their context, their resources, you know. I mean, of course, us in a Western culture, it's completely different to anywhere else in the world. But at the same time, then I wonder if there are some kind of more universal themes based on our dominant cultural paradigm that we need to shift to realize that.
Well, it's interesting because the first question which I have there is, what is the world? The world is often defined as our economical world. And often when you have a crisis, then you are talking of, I remember after Lehman Brothers, for example, there was a headline like, oh, the world is close to a completely failure or destruction. And I think, yeah, which world? I mean, the financial world, yes, for sure, can be, but it doesn't have anything to do with this world. And often what we are kind of extremely influenced with, like who is the president of the USA or whatever, it has no relevancy in the natural world. This tree over there, he doesn't care who is now the president. He is aligned with the natural laws, and this president is not a part of it. So I think in order to, and I think also this world, which we want to save through wars, through all sorts of things which are very questionable, is a world which is not so important. We think it is important, but it's, as you say, it's very destructive. And in order to save the world is to forget it. You know, to forget it. I mean, with that, I mean this economical world. And give all your attention and love to a world where paradise was never gone, and to see that this is a reality, and to acknowledge and be grateful for the reality and love this reality. And this is cannot be done through workshops where you begin as a beginner, then in intermediate, then advanced, and then masterclass. This hierarchical shit of this is accumulation of knowledge. This can be done immediate or not. It's an immediate response. It's an immediacy where you all of a sudden you see the beauty around you, you're completely inspired, and you see the world as it is, a paradise. I think with this, we don't need even to save something. This is already the holy grail, which we never needed to have. It's already all we need is around us. This acknowledgement is very important. And yeah, then it's not because when we're in the saver mentality, then we think, yeah, we need someone or something that saves us. We need a messiah, or we need now a new technology, or so. No, we are already, we're home. We're home. Acknowledge we are home, and be in appreciation and in gratefulness that we are home and we have this wonderful life, and then, yeah, everything is fine. And I see it around me. Everything is as you saw it as well. It's growing crazily beautiful. I mean, just today I saw the growth of a graft we made. It's in 2 weeks such a growth. I mean, because everything is so vibrant. This, when I would have planted just one plum tree and made a graft on it, it wouldn't work, because life needs life and life attracts life. So create an environment full of life, and then life unfolds itself with the laws of the universe. And I think if people would see that, they wouldn't accumulate unnecessary bullshit.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow on Substack and Instagram. The links are in the description. See you soon.